The story of Anatahan is a unique one. This story takes place on the island of Anatahan in the Northern Mariana Islands, not too far from the islands of Saipan and Guam. When I graduated college, I moved out to the island of Saipan, where I got a job as a commercial pilot flying for a small regional airline. When I'd fly many different passengers, you would learn all sorts of information. And one day somebody brought up the story of the Japanese holdouts on the island of Anatahan. Well, having done previous research in this area, I know where the island of Anatahan is, but I didn't know exactly what a Japanese holdout was. So, a Japanese holdout was a person or a group of people who didn't believe the war was over. They didn't believe Japan could lose the war. There was no established communication between them and Japan to let them know that the war is over. And so basically, these people would continue fighting. And the holdouts in Anatan were not the only ones. They had holdouts all the way to the 1970s that believed World War II was still going on. A group of Japanese sailors passing Anatan, American B-24s came in and bombed the ships. There were 3 ships that got bombed and sunk. And at this point, when the ships went down, anyone who survived would swim ashore. They had about 30 survivors that came off those ships. And when they got on the island, they soon realized that they weren't by themselves. From this copra plantation, there were 2 Japanese people left. There was a man and a woman. She was the only woman on the entire island. Her name was Kazuko Higa. For a brief period of time, they lived in peace and were just basically trying to survive. They were gathering supplies, building water catch systems, trying to avoid starvation and death, trying to avoid any sort of injury and infection that they could get along the way. As they adjusted to the life on this island, people started splitting up into separate tribes. Some of the tribes were people who wanted to live in peace, just try and survive, and live as happy and comfortable of a life as possible. Other tribes were a little more vicious. They wanted power, they wanted to be in control of the island. At this point, the military control had completely fallen apart, and it was every man for himself. So those tribes that wanted power, all they had to do was figure out a way to take it. And it wasn't long until they could figure out a way to take it. And of course, those who were in power held the ultimate prize, who of course was Kazuko Higa, the only woman on the island. Kazuko was interesting. Some of the men didn't think that she was worthy of living and taking up more of their food. Some of them even suggested killing her. And so she used her psychological advantage over the men to survive. But of course, as humans that have some sort of power over another, they develop a strong ego. This earned her the nickname, the Queen Bee. That's how you get the name, the Queen of Anatahan. During her time on the island, there were multiple overthrows of power. Someone wanted power more, and they even murdered for it. There were multiple murders on this island, mostly for Kazuko and the power over the other castaways. They were murdered in multiple different ways, including stabbings, shootings, and drownings. There's not too many cases where a whole group of their own people turn on each other. This story is not well known. It's not well documented. It has some documentation, but it really takes experts to tell the story. I have a number of interviews lined up with historians that are the best to tell this story. One of the main ones, his name is Don Farrell. Don has written multiple history books about the Northern Mariana Islands. Don is one of the most knowledgeable historians for history of the islands. If anyone's going to know this story, it's going to be Don. This film will be shot in a number of different places, some here in the United States, Saipan, Guam, Japan, and New Zealand. The most interesting place that we're going to be shooting is, of course, on the island of Anatahan. And Anatahan is not an easy island to get access to. The only way to get there is by boat, and because nobody lives there, they don't have boats going there all the time. So I have set up an expedition with a local explorer out in the Northern Mariana Islands who's going to take me and a small team to the island to help film this documentary. Due to a crude drawing of a map in one of the books, we happen to know where all the village sites were for the Japanese out there at this time. Another very important part of the story was the B-29 that crashed up inside the volcano. I understand that the wreckage of the B-29 is still there, and that would be a very important point to go shoot, so we are going to actually climb into the volcano to get shots of the wreckage of the B-29 that played such a pivotal role in this story. There were a few books written on this event. What all these books have in common is that they're inaccurate. They were falsified. They were given false information. Some of the survivors committed such atrocities that they band together to never share what truly happened, and many of them took it to their grave, only telling a select few. I've been researching this story since 2018. I visited the National Archives. I visited the archives at the University of Guam. I visited the archives in the University of Hawaii. I have interviewed descendants of survivors, descendants of men who performed the rescue of the survivors. I have put the puzzle pieces together, and I've tracked down the true story. This film, this documentary, not only will be the first documentary of the Japanese holdouts on Anatahan, but it'll be the first time ever that this story is told truthfully. It'll be the first time ever that their real names will be used, and that who was the one who murdered who. Some scenes have already been shot in Japan, in Okinawa, where some of the survivors were from, but most of the shooting will take place starting January 2025. If you want to stay up to date on this story, you can visit imdb.com, and you can look up the Queen of Anatahan.